Have you ever noticed that after your awakening, some things just didn't come back? It was not just a change of opinion. It was as if an old part of you had quietly died, and no one around him understood. The conversations became too shallow. Certain friendships began to weigh down, and that version of you that accepted everything disappeared. The strangest thing. You even tried to go back to who you were before, but he couldn't. Because when consciousness awakens, there is no off button. And today I'm going to show you the 5 things that never come back after your soul wakes up, and why that's the clearest sign that you're evolving, even if it feels like you're losing everything. Now, mentally, list 5 things you used to do before waking up and can't anymore. Now take a deep breath. They will never come back. And when you understand why, you'll be thankful for it. Most people spend their entire lives trying to find themselves. But no one warns you that there is a moment when you find yourself, and that meeting changes everything permanently, with no turning back, with no option to undo. It is not a crisis. It's not crazy. It is the awakening, and he charges a price that no one counts. 5 things that disappear forever. 5 permanent losses that at first glance seem like tragedy, but which, when examined closely, reveal the greatest liberation that a human being can experience. Here's the truth no one tells. What you lose in spiritual awakening was never really yours. It was borrowed. It was conditioning. It was a prison so well decorated that it looked like home. And the clearest proof of that is simple. You're here, reading this, with that familiar feeling that something has changed inside you, that you'll never go back to your former self. This feeling is not an impression. It is diagnostic. It is expanded consciousness recognizing itself. And the hidden side of this process is what this video will show, with a clarity that superficial content would never touch. If you've ever felt lonely after growing up, misunderstood after waking up, or awkward in the places that were once yours, this video was made for you, because what awaits you on the other side of this understanding is no longer confusion. It's relief. It's the feeling that you haven't regressed, you haven't gone crazy, you haven't overreacted. It is evolution. And to confirm that you are already on this path, comment below the number 5. 1 for each thing that never comes back. It's going to be eye-opening to see how many people are right where you are. There is a moment in the life of certain people when something inside them, silently, without asking permission, changes forever. It was not a conscious decision. There was no ceremony. There was no prior warning. Simply one day, this person looked in the mirror or at his own life and realized that he was no longer the same, and the most unsettling, that never comes back. That previous version, with all its comfortable certainties and its well-organized fears, left without leaving an address. And then comes the scare. Most people, when they feel this, think that there is something wrong with them, who lost something important, who exaggerated the spiritual journey, who need to go back to who they were before to fit in again. But the truth, and this is a truth that no one tells, is that there is no going back. Not because it is impossible to make an effort, but because you do not unsee what you have already seen. Expanded consciousness has no undo button. It is an irreversible change, and that, my friend, is exactly what will be explored here. There are 5 specific things that, once lost in the awakening process, disappear permanently. And contrary to what fear whispers in moments of longing, these permanent losses are not tragedies. They are liberation by another name. The point is that liberation, before it looks like freedom, almost always looks like loneliness, strangeness, and the feeling that you no longer fit in the places you once did. But there is something on the other side of this one-way door that is worth much more than what was left behind. Think of a child learning to read. Before the letters make sense, she looks at a page and sees only scribbles. meaningless shapes, an alien code. But once she learns, after that click happens in her little head, she never comes back. She can't look at the word house and see just a drawing. Meaning comes automatic, involuntary, permanent. No one calls it a loss. Everyone calls it evolution. And this is exactly what happens to consciousness when it expands. It is a permanent expansion with no return, and trying to unlearn would be as absurd as trying to forget how to read. Spiritual awakening works like a one-way door. You walk in, and the door doesn't open the other way. But here's what most don't realize. What is outside that door was not freedom. It was a well-decorated cell. That comfortable ignorance, that blind faith without question, that tolerance of the intolerable. All of this had the appearance of peace, but it was only anesthesia. And anesthesia, as delicious as it is, doesn't cure anything. It just postpones it. The consciousness upgrade hurts because it wakes up the one who was sleeping, and waking up always has an initial cost. What is lost in awakening are not capacities, they are currents. Chains that, because they had been worn for so long, came to look like part of the body. Like that employee who has been working for 20 years in a job he hates, and when he finally resigns, feels a strange emptiness, not because he wanted to stay, but because he no longer knew who he was without it. Irreversible change is scary, not because it is bad, but because it is unknown. And the unknown to a mind that has spent years seeking control sounds like a threat. But it is precisely in this unknown that real life begins. There was a time when everything was simpler. The 9 o'clock soap opera was just entertainment. The family reunion was just Sunday lunch. And the news in the newspaper was just information. The person lived on automatic, accepted what they taught, repeated what they heard, and slept reasonably well. Not because life was perfect, but because the right questions hadn't arrived yet. This innocence, this comfortable ignorance of living without a critical filter has a real charm. It's light, it's simple, it is above all socially accepted. But then comes the moment, and those who have been through it know exactly what it is about, when the person begins to see what was always there, only invisible. He sees manipulation where he used to see love. He sees control where he saw care. He sees conditioning where he saw truth. And this seeing, my friend, cannot be undone. You don't unsee what you've seen. It's like discovering a magician's trick. No matter how hard you try, you'll never watch the show with the same eyes again. Expanded consciousness is both the most valuable and the most disturbing gift one can receive. The difficult side, and this is the hidden side that almost no one mentions, is that this recalibration has a social price. Suddenly, sitting down to watch a reality show becomes an involuntary lesson in power dynamics. A family conversation becomes a study of patterns repeated for generations. You can't turn off the observation mode anymore, and it gets tiring. People around you begin to notice that something has changed, that you ask questions that no one has asked before, that you no longer accept ready-made answers. And here comes the first great discomfort of those who awaken, discovering that the innocence you lost protected not only you, but also the comfort of those around you. For years, perhaps decades, the person builds his own life as if he were putting together a resume for the approval of others. He chooses the college that his family considers respectable. It stays in the relationship that society validates. He hides the strange tastes, the controversial opinions, the parts of himself that do not fit the mold of what is considered acceptable. And he does all this so naturally, so automatically, that he doesn't even realize that he is cheating on himself full-time. External approval turns into oxygen, invisible, but without it, the feeling is of suffocation. Awakening breaks this cycle in a way that has no turning back. And it's not a heroic decision, it's not a moment of epic courage. It's more subtle than that. It's a day when the person realizes that someone's opinion about them has become only information, not determination, not sentence, just a given. And when this happens, something is permanently reorganized inside. Authentic freedom does not come as euphoria. It arrives as silence, like that strange feeling of not having to explain, justify, or ask permission to exist the way you are. The hard side is real, and it would be dishonest not to talk about it. Disappointing people hurts. The family that doesn't understand. The friends who say that you have changed for the worse, as if growing up is a defect. The most curious thing is that the heaviest judgment does not come from strangers. It comes from those who knew you in the previous version and don't know what to do with this new version. They call you changed, antisocial, egocentric. But what scares them, in fact, is the mirror, because someone who has stopped seeking external approval unwittingly reminds everyone that this search is a choice. And this memory is too uncomfortable for many people. There was a version of this person who could handle everything. He spent hours in an empty conversation about soap opera gossip, smiled politely at his co-worker's unfunny joke, sat at family lunches where the air was cut with a knife, and pretended that everything was fine. He tolerated a lack of respect so as not to create a problem. He swallowed comments that hurt to keep the peace. And I honestly thought that this was maturity, that enduring the intolerable in silence was a virtue, that pretending was education. No one is born knowing that this is one of the most sophisticated disguises of the invisible prison. After awakening, the body sends the message before the mind rationalizes. It is no longer a conscious decision to leave this party. It is a physical, almost involuntary repulsion to certain environments, certain conversations, certain energies. The nervous system recalibrated. The limits have become automatic, as if the body has developed an internal sensor that beeps when something no longer fits. This is what few say about spiritual awakening. It is not only mental, it is somatic, it's cellular. Recalibration happens in layers that go far beyond thought. And then the labels arrive, because they always do. They call you boring, of killjoys, of very serious for his age. You leave parties early, refuse invitations that you used to accept automatically, stay quiet in conversation circles that you used to feed for hours. From the outside, it seems spiritual antisocial. From the inside, it's the most honest thing you've ever done for your own health. The difference between those who understand and those who do not understand this process is exactly there. One sees abandonment, the other sees self-preservation. And there is a fourth thing that disappears in this process, something even deeper, which messes with the basis of everything the person believed to be true. For most of life, the person delegates the thought without realizing it. The doctor said it's said, the priest confirmed it's true, the newspaper reported it, it happened, the government decreed it, it is true. There's tremendous comfort in outsourcing one's own conclusions, because thinking on your own takes work, creates responsibility, and sometimes leads to uncomfortable places. Blind faith in authorities and institutions is, at bottom, a silent agreement. I don't question it, and in return you give me the feeling that the world makes sense. It is a comfortable contract, until the day it breaks. Awakening brings with it something that cannot be returned, self-discernment. It's not cynicism, it's not paranoia, it's not turning against for sport. It's simply stopping accepting anything as absolute truth just because it came from a source considered reliable. The person begins to research, to cross information, to feel in the body when something really resonates, and when it is just a well-packaged narrative. This permanent expansion of critical capacity changes the way we see everything: health, politics, religion, media. External authority does not disappear, but loses the absolute power it once had. The social price of this is high, and it is honest to admit. The family thinks the person has gone crazy. Older friends are uncomfortable with the question she asks. Any question about religion becomes heresy. Any doubt about medicine becomes conspiratorial hypochondria. Any political analysis becomes radicalism. They call you a conspiracy theorist with frightening ease, as if questioning and investigating were symptoms of madness, not intelligence. But there is something even deeper that disappears in this awakening process, something that most people consider the most primal fear that exists. The fear of death is probably the oldest tenet of the human mind. He pays rent in the form of chronic anxiety, the need for control, obsessive planning for a future that never arrives the way planned. The person avoids thinking about it, changes the channel when the topic comes up, makes plans and more plans, as if organizing enough could postpone the inevitable. And it's not weakness, it's conditioning. From an early age, death is treated as the great enemy, the end of everything, the ultimate failure of existence. No one teaches you to live with it. They teach you to run away. After awakening, something fundamental is reorganized in this relationship. The person begins to realize, not as an intellectual concept, but as a real experience, that he is consciousness before he is a body. And when this perception sets in, really not as a beautiful phrase in a book, death ceases to be an end and becomes a transition. The uncertain future is no longer a threat and becomes an interesting mystery. Detachment from control does not come as resignation, but as genuine trust in the flow of life. Living truly present without the constant shadow of what-ifs is one of the quietest and most profound changes that awakening causes. The curious side, and a little ironic, is that the people around interpret this piece as irresponsible. "How are you not afraid of this?" becomes an accusation. "You don't take anything seriously" becomes a diagnosis. But what they are seeing, in fact, is someone who has stopped wasting vital energy trying to control the uncontrollable, who exchanged chronic anxiety for real presence, who understood that death is not the opposite of life, it is part of it. And when the 5 permanent losses add up, when you look at everything that has gone, an inevitable question arises: were they really losses? There is a very well-constructed illusion around spiritual awakening, and it sounds something like this. You have lost your lightness, you have lost your connections, you have lost your simplicity. And at first glance, it seems true. The person looks back and sees a version of himself that laughed easier, that fit in more places, that slept without so much questioning in his head. But here's what this narrative hides: that lightness was unconsciousness. Those connections were illusions of connection. That simplicity was, in large part, anesthesia. What looks like loss, when examined closely, reveals something different: removal of limitations disguised as comfort. Think of it this way: when someone takes a cast off their arm after weeks of immobilization, the first movement hurts. The muscle has atrophied, the joint is stiff, the body needs to relearn. At that moment, the person could look at the plaster on the floor and feel nostalgia. After all, with it, it didn't hurt at all. But no one in their right mind would put the plaster back on. Because the plaster was not comfort. It was a necessary limitation in one phase, which became an obstacle in the next. Permanent losses from awakening work just like that. You haven't lost capabilities. He lost chains that were too light to look like chains. The most powerful reframe there is simple: change, never again, to finally free of. I'll never have to pretend to agree again, finally free from constant performance. I will never seek approval for each choice again. Finally free from the need for external validation. Each permanent loss, reread with this look, reveals the disguised gain that has always been there. It's not empty positivism, it's precision. It is to see reality without the filter of mourning for what was no longer useful. And when that clarity arrives, it brings with it something unexpected: nostalgia. A specific nostalgia with a very precise address. The nostalgia for the before is real, and any mentor who says otherwise is selling you a sanitized version of awakening. There are days when the person looks at the old photo, remembers a time when he didn't see so much, when he fit in places effortlessly, when lightness was genuine, or at least it seemed to be. There are times when the weight of expanded consciousness gets tired, when the loneliness of the awakened person really tightens, when the person thinks, what if I just stopped questioning everything and went back to living on automatic? This thinking is human, it's honest, and it doesn't need to generate guilt. But here's the question worth asking in these moments, and it's worth asking with brutal honesty. Do you really want to go back, or do you want the current journey to be less lonely? Because they are two completely different things. Wanting to go back would be giving up everything you've seen, understood, integrated. It would put the cast back on the healthy arm. Wanting company on this journey, wanting to be understood by those around you, wanting the process to hurt less. This is not weakness, it is a legitimate human need. And when the person makes this distinction clearly, the honest answer is almost always the second. Longing, when examined closely, is rarely what it appears to be. It is not nostalgia for ignorance. It is nostalgia for the simplicity that ignorance provided. It is not nostalgia for blind faith. It is nostalgia for the security it simulated. It is not a longing to tolerate the intolerable. It is a longing to belong at no cost. And recognizing this changes everything, because you stop fighting against your own evolution and start looking for what is really missing. Depth in connections, community with those you also see, welcome without having to regress to get it. And that's exactly where something lies that most of the awakened one has not yet realized about irreversibility. There is a silent security that comes with irreversible change, and paradoxically, it is one of the first things that the awakened one takes a long time to realize. When the person truly understands that there is no turning back, not as a threat, but as a fact, something relaxes inside. It stops wasting energy trying to protect its own growth, checking if it is still on the right track, being afraid of waking up one day and having regressed to the previous version. There is no way to regress. The hard work has already been done. The door only opens forward, and this, far from being a prison, is one of the most profound forms of rest that exist. Think about the difference between learning to swim and trying not to forget to swim. Those who have truly learned do not wake up at 3 in the morning worried if they still know. The body knows. Muscle memory is there, permanent, available. Awakening works the same. Once consciousness truly expands, it does not shrink. You won't wake up one day unable to question, dependent on external approval, feigning happiness in environments that suffocate you. That level of consciousness is already yours. It does not need to be protected, defended, or monitored. It needs to be inhabited. And inhabiting one's own permanent expansion is a daily exercise that has much more to do with presence than with effort. It's waking up and no longer having to build a version of yourself to present to the world. It is making decisions based on one's own discernment without waiting for validation. It is to feel detachment from control, not as indifference, but as trust. Irreversibility, which at first seemed like a sentence, reveals its true face over time. It is an anchor. It's proof that you can't be undone. And with that clear, the next step is no longer about what has been lost. It's about actively honoring what has been achieved. Knowing that something has changed permanently is one thing. Honoring this change in everyday life is quite another. And here's a point that few address clearly. Awakening is not a destination. It's a starting point. What comes next requires practice, not perfection. One of the most transformative and simplest practices is to reframe each moment when you realize that you can no longer do something you did before. Instead of interpreting this as loss or isolation, celebrate it as evidence of real growth. I can no longer pretend to be okay in environments that drain me is not social weakness. It is silent victory. Another essential practice is not to force the fit where you clearly no longer fit. This seems obvious, but in practice, it is one of the biggest challenges of the awakened person, especially when the places that no longer fit are family, old friendships, work environments. The impulse to compress, to become smaller, to generate less friction is strong and old. But each time a person gives in to this impulse, he pays a price that accumulates, the price of self-betrayal. Not forcing fit in doesn't mean abandoning people. It means stopping abandoning yourself to be close to them. It is a distinction that changes everything in practice. Finally, documenting the journey is one of the most underrated tools for those who are in this process. It doesn't have to be an elaborate diary. It can be notes on your cell phone, audios for yourself, simple records of perceptions and moments of clarity. Because there will come a day when doubt hits, when the loneliness of the awakened one tightens hard, when the person wonders if it was worth it. And in those moments, rereading one's own path is a powerful antidote. It is the concrete proof, written by one's own hand, that what was lost was no longer useful, and that what remained is real, solid, and genuinely yours. And it is exactly with this certainty that we arrive at what is perhaps the most important point of this whole conversation. There is a truth that the awakened one needs to hear, and really listen, not just understand intellectually. You have not regressed. You didn't lose your way, you didn't exaggerate, you didn't go too far. What seemed like loss was liberation wearing a strange outfit. The innocence that went away wasn't yours. It was borrowed from a system that needed you not to question. The need for approval that disappeared wasn't self-love. It was fear of being rejected, disguised as an identity. The tolerance of the intolerable that evaporated was not a virtue. It was survival that had already fulfilled its role. Nothing that went away was permanently his. It was temporary. It was a phase. It was scaffolding. What remains after all these permanent losses is the part that has always been real. It's you, without filter, without performance, without the armor of someone who needs to be accepted to feel whole. And this version, the one left after everything that didn't serve was gone, is more capable of truly loving, of truly connecting, of truly living. Not because it's perfect, but because it's authentic. Authentic freedom is not the absence of pain or challenge. It is the ability to face anything without having to betray yourself in the process. It is evolution, not loss. It is liberation, not abandonment. And if today you miss who you were before, if you feel that you no longer fit in places that were once yours, if they call you changed as if it were an accusation, receive this as confirmation, not criticism. Because only those who really grow change. What never comes back wasn't yours to begin with. He was on loan, temporary, part of a phase that has already fulfilled what he needed. What remains is the essential. What remains is whole. What remains is free. And that is, no one takes away. You've come this far, and that already says a lot about who you are. Not everyone can look at their own journey with this honesty, face what was lost, recognize what was gained, and have the courage to admit that the version of before, as comfortable as it was, no longer fit. This is rare. This is real. And now comes the most important part of everything that has been said here. Knowledge that does not become action is just well-packaged entertainment. So the question that remains is straightforward. What are you going to do differently from today with all this? Think about the 5 things that never come back and ask yourself honestly, which one are you still trying to recover? Which old version are you still trying to resurrect, to please someone, to fit in somewhere, to avoid a conflict that deep down is already resolved within you? Are you still compressing yourself to fit into spaces that were once yours, but are no longer? Are you still seeking approval from people who will never understand your permanent expansion? Are you still tolerating the intolerable in the name of a peace that is not peace? Is it just the absence of confrontation? These uncomfortable questions are exactly what separates those who have read content from those who have actually transformed something. The awakening doesn't end when the video ends. It continues in every choice, in every boundary you honor, in every time you choose authentic freedom over easy approval. The one-way door has already been opened. And now, it's about walking through it with more and more awareness, more and more wholeness, more and more you. If this content touched something real to you, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because that was just one of the layers. There's a lot more to come, and each video goes one step deeper than the last. You didn't get here by accident. Keep going.